All right, now to the southern border, where tens of thousands of migrants are waiting for a decision by the Supreme Court on Title 42. The White House is asking to keep the pandemic-era policy in place at least until after Christmas, as we're getting another set of new border numbers showing just how severe the humanitarian crisis has gotten under President Biden. Rodney Scott is a former U.S. Border Patrol chief, now a distinguished senior fellow for border security at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. So, Customs and Border Protection or the White House, Rodney, I'm not sure which, seems to be slow walking the numbers from November. But our Griff Jenkins has gotten information, and we'll put it up on the screen here, that fiscal year 23 to date so far, between October the 1st and now, 575,409 people that we know of have crossed the border illegally. Compare that to all of fiscal year 2020, which was 458,000. I mean, you can see why the White House doesn't want these numbers out there, particularly when Congress is debating this huge omnibus spending bill.
Thank you for pointing that out. And it would be the White House that's holding those numbers back. See, when I was chief, I had final end of the month numbers within a few days. Mm-hmm. We always give it about 5 to 10 days so we can let anybody that's going through the process kind of filter out. But they don't want those numbers out. And the reason they don't want those numbers out is that's just a piece of it. Those are only the knowns. Really, what America needs to be worried about is that has taken up 80% of the Border Patrol agents, so hundreds of miles of border are wide open. And even with the border being wide open, there's still an average of 2,000 gotaways every single day where agents see them, but there's no one left to be able to respond to stop them. That is a real threat to this country, and this administration is doing nothing to slow it down.
You know, when you consider 575,000 people from October so far through December, this is usually the quiet time for illegal immigration. If those numbers were to hold for the other 3 quarters, we'd be back to 2.4 million people during fiscal year 23. But those numbers will likely increase as the weather warms up in the spring. But we're talking about Title 42 coming off, and one day it will. There's no question about that. The White House has acknowledged it can't stay on forever. So far in fiscal year 2023, 177,818 have been expelled from the country under Title 42. But take a look at this. 397,591 have been released into the country pending court dates, and 86 migrants have died, and I believe it's 84 days. I mean, these statistics, Rodney, are just stunning.
Yeah, this administration talks about wanting a more humane border. They've done the absolute opposite. This endless flow of humans being handed to the cartels allows them to shape the border to bring in fentanyl, heroin, cocaine every single day. And it's at the expense of the lives of these migrants, not to talk about the sexual abuse and everything else that takes place. Mm-hmm. But most of the morgues along the southwest border were overflowing literally this last year. And no one wants to talk about that. This is a humanitarian crisis. It's a national security crisis. And unfortunately, as we saw in some of the reports, the administration might be frustrated, but they refuse to do anything about it. It appears they're frustrated with the optics and not the real problem.
On the subject of the frustration in the White House, and I want to jump to call for number 4 here. A new book by Chris Whipple says that President Biden, on at least one occasion, has lost it over the border crisis. He writes in the fight of his life inside Joe Biden's White House. Meanwhile, illegal immigrants kept arriving, and Biden was furious. Aides had rarely seen him so angry. From all over the West Wing, you could hear the president cursing, dropping F-bombs. He'd always apologize when women were present. The president apparently is upset at the lack of solutions, but if memory serves me correctly, Rodney, he's the one who took off all the protections that were in place that were keeping people from crossing the border.
Yeah, that frustration sure doesn't play out into action. The reason we're talking so much about Title 42 today is because this administration took the playbook that career government employees with years of experience put together to help secure the border. And then he threw that out. Every single initiative that we had in place to secure the border, to slow down the flow of illegal immigration, because that is what the cartels use to mask their other criminal activity, this administration threw it out. Just pull that playbook back out, reinvest in the Remain in Mexico program, mm-hmm. Reinvest in building some barriers that make every single Border Patrol agent more effective, and probably just as importantly, reinvest some pressure on Mexico to enforce their own laws and to bring some transparency to some of the challenges we have down there. and all of a sudden this crisis starts slowing down.
Well,
but they won't do any of that.
Well, the president's under increasing pressure from members of his own party, though the number of voices is still small at this point. So we'll see if in the new year they begin to rethink this or if they just continue along the same path. Rodney, always great to catch up with you. Thanks for your thoughts on this. Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you, and a shout out to all the first responders that'll be working over the Christmas holiday while we're enjoying it. Merry Christmas.
We'll be thinking about them. Thanks, Rodney.